Hey everybody. Hey. Just doing a little bit of studying, as everybody's probably heard, Howard the Duck Bloom and Ashley Bumfield with some Nancy Disgrace are all kind of in the midst of wanting to do movies about the Idaho 4 and stuff. So I thought if I could study like Bryan Kohberger and get as prepared for a quadruple homicide that maybe they would choose me to play the lead role of Bryan Kohberger in the movie, and maybe if I do such a good enough job, playing the part for the masses to see and just follow with the narrative and the story, that even the Gonzalez can make some good money off of the movie too. So the loss of the victims would be just raised before all of our eyes in money. Yeah, I'm ARHayes. This is Convicts Thoughts. And ladies and gentlemen, there are still people out there that truly believe Bryan Kohberger spent his entire lifetime preparing to commit the crime that took place in Moscow, Idaho, where 4 individuals lost their lives by what the state of Idaho and the prosecution is deeming to be a single individual with a single knife. And it just still baffles me to this day that just because the man read books and studied and possibly interviewed a few people, that gave him the capability to not only pull off the crime, but to leave potentially the least amount of evidence that any big crime of this magnitude could possibly leave. And people say it's based off of his knowledge and his studies that would have allowed him to do that. But you see, I kind of have an issue with the theories that people claim and keep throwing out there, because I personally myself know what the experience does for you within the criminal mindset and being able to accomplish the committing of crimes. But I've also been around some pretty notorious, pretty intelligent individuals who also committed just tragic crimes, but they did theirs so well. They didn't get the death penalty. They didn't even get life sentences without parole. I was incarcerated with a gentleman, Doug Martin, all over 48 Hours Mystery, out of the Phoenix, Arizona area, when he took the life of his wife. But he had it actually planned well enough that he got a manslaughter charge and didn't do more than 5 years on a minimum security prison yard. That was pretty good planning. Even though he was still found guilty, he only did 5 years. Now he's got a new, much younger wife with many more children, living a great life because he got out of the penitentiary and is back to doing what he always wanted to do. But then we got to look at the Bryan Kohberger situation. I understand that he was a scholar. He was in a PhD program at Washington State University, studying within the criminal justice system to further his life even more and to become successful within a field that would have been protecting people like you and I. Now, I don't know whether the man had something loose upstairs and this just potentially was a crime that he was destined to commit at some point in time. But please, do not tell me that the reasoning why certain things, evidence-wise, have not been found in this case is all based because of his perfect planning that he spent a lifetime doing. So now that I'm kind of on a roll here, and I really want this part in the upcoming movie. I really want it. So I've got to go through and really, in my mind, piece together exactly how, if I were Bryan Kohberger, my perfect planning for a lifetime came into effect in this case. I've got to start with the fact that if I have no connection to the individuals or the home, it's pretty hard to plan in a very short period of time, less than 4 months, a crime like this that would satisfy or fulfill a lifetime urge. Something would have had to have built up within Bryan Kohberger to lead to these emotions and these plans to come into tuition. What was it? Because the officers at the very, very beginning of the entirety of the case, when they stood at the podium, said it was either the people of the home or the home itself that was targeted. Now, because I've heard the rumblings of the stolen chem lab key and Bryan Kohberger wanting to build bombs, now I've got to also take into account in my mind, because we've heard from Steve Gonsalves himself, that the prosecution wanted him and Christie to sign documents for them to investigate mail. That would be a federal investigation. So when Howard the Duck Bloom states that there's a possible investigation into Bryan Kohberger on a federal level, and then he mentions those types of things, bomb making, I begin to wonder, was Bryan Kohberger trying to be a mail bomber? Or did he have in his mindset, through planning of his entire life, even working at a fishery to learn how to slice fish for all of the few days that he lasted, was he going to be a serial killer with a knife? Kind of like Michael Myers. I mean, Kohberger, if he had been planning this for a long period of time of his life, probably was trying to be like his sister, who was going to be in a horrifically graphic slasher movie. And Bryan Kohberger just wanted to bring it to real life. And that's why he decided that he was going to turn his life around and quit doing heroin and get out of that lifestyle and become more dedicated to bettering himself by putting himself even into a PhD program at a major university. We're not talking about like your second-hand online school or, a junior college. Some of us can barely even make it through junior college, but, He'd been working on this his entire life, evidently, probably even while he was nodding off from the heroin or, stealing cell phones from his family members. That was all the plan to help him get into studying, to working within law enforcement. Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Theft always leads also to violent crimes. Theft of a cell phone at the age of 14 or 15 always is just the preempt to getting into a quadruple homicide maniac. But remember, it's very important as well when you go through the step-by-step planning of a crime, that one, you make sure you use your own car. You have to plan it out just perfectly that you get to use your own car during the crime, so it doesn't seem as though you're trying to hide anything from anybody. While you're out doing that, you're preparing to use your own car, you might as well hop onto your own Amazon account or maybe your Walmart.com account and order supplies that you'll utilize during the crime, including the weapon itself. I mean, that would be, just make sure you use your own debit and credit card to buy those, because you wouldn't want anybody that was investigating the crime to think that you were actually trying to hide the fact you bought the very style weapon that is being specified as the weapon used in the Idaho 4 crime. So you got to make sure you lock that down. That's perfect planning. You got to make sure that you buy the same exact weapon that's used in the crime under your own name with your own debit card, and make sure you either deliver it to yourself or to an address directly trackable to you. Good part of the plan. Good part of the plan. But you also got to remember, you got to run to Walmart and you got to buy the outfit that you're going to wear while committing the crime, and hang on to all those tags, because that's going to be a part of your records later. When you got to go through and you've got to literally figure out, because you're planning this out, you're planning this crime step by step out. You have to remember exactly how many pennies out of your bank account you spent on what that goes to the crime. So you get a notebook and you break it down into different sections so that you can signify your notes depending on what it is, details of the crime, so that you can keep a full running tab even of the financials of that very crime. I mean, you wouldn't want to spend too much money on a quadruple homicide. You got to think about the inflation in gas prices. Now we got to buy a box of masks because of COVID, but you're just going to go ahead and use one of those during the crime, so it's money well spent. That's great planning. It's great planning. And don't forget, when you plan all of this out, because you've decided to use your own car while committing the crime, you got to make sure that you take your shower curtain out of your apartment and line the trunk with your shower curtain, just as an encase buffer that you can lay the murder weapon that you bought online using your own debit card into the trunk of the car. Because a part of the plan is to dispose of the weapon where nobody will ever find it. But it's okay, because you've left records for them that you bought it. So it's okay. It's okay. I think I'm getting this down pretty well. Now, also, a part of the plan is to act awkward around other people, especially females, so that people can build a narrative claiming that you have everything and anything against females, except for you want to make sure that you go on a few dates acting as oddly as you possibly can, making odd comments, kind of like you're just maybe kind of a dork, or you're shy and you're not really all that social, so you want to put on this great show for one or two girls, not the ones at the party that actually you impressed enough that gave you their phone number. You just want to make the people that are kind of weird themselves make the statement that you said they had great birthing hips. Yeah, we got to get that. Got to make sure that it's part of the plan. Got to do it. Now, ahead of time, you need to know your plan so well that after you're finished committing the very crime, you not only have a doctor's appointment just days after, but you also are going to get your hair cut, and then your dad's going to come out to ride home back all the way across the country with you to Pennsylvania for Thanksgiving and Christmas, because it's very important that if you get taken down, that you put your family's life at risk as well. And if you don't get caught on the drive, you can always just make sure that you disrupt the entirety of the new year for your family, because you'll get raided at your parents' house, and they can't even afford their bills as it is. So we'll just let the authorities completely destruct the whole house to where the family can no longer afford to live there. Put that down. That's a part of the plan. I'm telling you. So far, we're nailing the fact that we're going to drive our own car to do the crime. We're going to leave every type of financial record of buying the weapon. We're going to use our own shower curtain to cover the back of the trunk of the car to put the murder weapon. We're going to buy the clothes at Walmart using our own pennies to do so, and we'll keep the receipts. We might not keep the clothes, but we're going to go and keep those receipts. And and then we got to include the family in the car ride back after the fact, while we've been seen by the doctor and gotten our hair cut. Now, also a part of the plan, because we got to keep up the whole aura that we don't like women, we're going to make sure that we visibly demonstrate that we're going to grade female papers and assignments at the university in the PhD program where I tutor, or Bryan Koberger tutors. We're going to overly and aggressively grade female papers as if, it's disrespect for them completely. But we'll act normal at a pool party, so we get a couple of phone numbers. But we'll save those for later, because first we have to handle the house that we are planning this complete, just historic crime of all natures, where 6 people will be in the home. But I mean, we're gonna do it on a major weekend, and maybe the date falls in line with something, but it also falls in line on a very busy weekend, that we feel as though the home that's always a party home will be a non-party home that night. So we should be able to pull it off if we leave our home at approximately 2:47 in the morning and drive around aimlessly, in making sure that we turn off our phone, just so that when the investigation does transpire, they see this really odd action of us turning off our phone while we cruise in camera views. But we make sure that we are the car that stands out the most, because we don't have a front license plate. We have a bright white car, and hell, we'll even drive around while the police are in the very area harassing people for underage drinking. That shouldn't matter on the night of a quadruple homicide. That police in the area should mean nothing to my plans of committing this crime. So I'm going to write it in there. It's not a big deal if we see law enforcement at any point in time. Don't get nervous. Just handle your business. All right. Noted. I just don't get where people think the lifetime of planning went into this. You don't go lifetime into planning into walking into a home of 6 people legitimately there, some cars in the front that you don't even know who they are, not knowing whether it's party central that night. Maybe that's why you drive around for so long, just to make sure the party's actually over, even though there wasn't a party. But you make sure as well, you have to make sure that you can't carry your actual weapon of choice to commit this crime that you've thought about this so many times that you have to make sure that you walk into the home with the wife's the knife still holstered. You want to make sure you take as much evidence in with you that you could possibly leave behind, rather than just walking in quickly, handling your business and making a getaway for it. You're so experienced, Bryan Kober, through all of your studies and readings of books, that you know that within a 7-minute time frame, you will have no issues getting in and out, taking 4 lives, leaving 2 people alive, one seemingly to be a witness, but both awake and texting back and forth. And your perfect plan of a lifetime ensures that no officers would be called. 911 would not be dialed while you're in the home. And you're so good at this that you can absolutely control through all of your planning exactly where each blood drop flies during the blood splattering, and you're going to absolutely be able to control who screams, who does it, what footsteps are heard, what is going on in the entirety of the event. You have it fully under control because it's lifetime planning. You are so good at this, so talented, that you can, even in all of that quickness of taking out 4 people in a very devastatingly way, not just your typical pillowcase over the face, no blood splatter, no creation of a mess. No, you're going to do it in a horrific way in a short period of time and be in no rush to exit the door and just hop in your car and drive away, never once worrying about. And again, ladies and gentlemen, it's because it's a lifetime of planning that no DNA would be left within his own car. No blood, no spit, no nothing. Nothing. Hair? Yeah, he must have planned that he was going to drive around in his own car after committing the crime. Even the day after the crime, people that claim that he returned back to the scene at 9 a.m. So all these people that say he had a legitimate month to clean his car, Bryan Kober had a whole month from the time of the crime till after he was arrested and his car was found to clean his car. Yet he was willing to drive the very car that supposedly he drove to the crime to commit the crime. He was going to drive it the very next day back to the crime scene. And then, you make a few stops like Albertsons and things of that nature, because it's not a big deal. His car, if there was any blood or DNA evidence in there, he had the full month within his plan of evading of law enforcement, that he could clean his car later. He doesn't need to clean it before driving it again. He doesn't need to get rid of it. He'll just drive it the way it is because he knows he didn't get anything in that car because of his perfect planning. The shower curtain in the trunk did its duty. And let me tell you, all the saran wrap and everything else that you could possibly have ordered online to wrap his car, it did its job. And then, that's what took him the additional 20 minutes to drive back to his house after committing the crime, is the fact they had to stop and peel all that plastic off of his car before he drove it home. Perfect plan. I'm telling you. Perfect plan. It's also a perfect plan, for most quadruple homicide people, that they don't run. They hang out. And I do have to admit, there are some major serial and other murderers that don't flee. They don't run. They've got the family life. They've got the home life. They've got the things that can help conceal what they're doing, and they get away with it for a long period of time. Doesn't sound like Bryan Kohberger really had that. I mean, he was just in plain sight the entire time, still acting in what people say odd. Part of the plan, right? I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, whatever you feel as though you can study and read in a book is never going to teach you what the actual events of a crime are. You can plan and plan and plan to commit a crime in a certain way, and 99.9% of the time, the crime never goes as planned. Bryan Kohberger, if he was the one that did this, planned that Ethan would be at the home? Did he plan that Kaylee would be back? Did he plan that nobody that legitimately heard that crime happening would dial 911? Did he plan that it would be okay to just cruise around in his own car while authorities are out and about on a big drinking night because it's a big football game? Obviously, it was a drinking night because officers were at the Banfield, around the very crime scene home, stopping people for underage drinking. He must have had that perfect plan that starting at 3 a.m. forward would just be silent, when we all know it wasn't. I know what it was. Bryan Kohberger knew in all of his planning that law enforcement would botch the investigation. They would allow a quadruple homicide suspect, if he was the one, to drive all the way across the country to Pennsylvania, following him in Howard the Duck Bloom's statements in a little prop plane by the FBI. You know, that's how FBI likes to do things nowadays, with all the high-tech stuff that they have and the capability of legitimately locking onto somebody and following them all the way across the country. They would rather do it in a little bitty plane, probably 8 of them crammed in there, eating Twinkies. That was part of the plan. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get serious for the last moment of this. If Bryan Kohberger had been planning this for the entirety of his life, it wouldn't be as comical when we talk about how that plan really kind of came together. The crime itself is not comical, but what people are saying to try to draw Bryan Kohberger's perfect picture as the suspect of this crime is comical. You can't plan a crime like this, detail by detail by detail, and expect any of it to work, even as people say he planned that he could clean his car. How the hell would you know you weren't getting pulled over at 4:52 a.m. that night while you're driving home? You could get pulled over by an officer that sees you don't have a front license plate on your car in a state that requires it. Ladies and gentlemen, this was not a well-planned crime. If it was committed by somebody like Bryan Kohberger or Bryan Kohberger himself, this was not the perfect planned crime by a single perp. But I'll tell you what, in my opinion, and it's a really scary thought, it's a perfect planned crime for the ones who committed it that are still free and walking the streets. And that's scary. ARHayes. Convicts thoughts. I hope I get the part, Howard the Duck Bloom. I really want to be in the movie. Have a good night.